Today, everyone knows that despite the allied relations of the Soviet Union with America and Britain, the Cold War began after World War I, which thus are lost. Now there is actually a new Cold War and there is a danger that it may become hot again. After all, humanity is not divided in half, as during the Second World War. We must expand our worldview platform and realize that humanity is created in the image and likeness of the living nature of planet Earth, and all life on the planet is organized by species structures. Each subspecies has its own biological program. We must understand that every species of living organisms on the planet does not live just for the sake of living. It performs a certain function, even devouring others like predators. And thanks to this functional interaction, life, harmony, and the beauty of nature are preserved. And humanity is designed in such a way that we are still given the opportunity to think intelligently and make decisions. Logic suggests one thing, but a person is able to choose another. What for is a separate question, but the only intelligent species on the planet was created to maintain harmony if nature itself fails. But at some point, humanity took a different path. In the animal world, we will not find a single species or subspecies that would hide reserves of some kind of wealth, food, and the Bible and the Quran were written to a person, and many other things. But greed often wins in the competition of greed and conscience. The world's ethnocultural civilizations in geopolitics are divided into maritime and continental. When a ship approached a certain shore, the inhabitants with a spear and bows saw it as an enemy at first, and as a rule, this happened. The ships, which were moored to the shore by necessity, also looked at the inhabitants of the land with a very wary look. Then the confrontation was laid. What else does geopolitics say? Continental peoples live by their own labor. They have little opportunity for travel, movement. They are more conservative and not so greedy. And the sea peoples live by prey, and all the time they look where to grab something. Even the great Hegel wrote that the sea calls for robbery. Look, there are monuments to pirates in England. It's nonsense that they sank someone, robbed. The main thing is that they brought the loot to the House of Britain. Classical geopolitics did not take into account such emerging subjects as are shown in Taras Bulba. He sells it to Poles and Cossacks. But today it is precisely trade intermediaries, bankers, loan sharks, and multinational corporations that have become the main subjects of the global geopolitical process. And they are not taken into account anywhere in geopolitics. If UN Charter and international agreements normalize the behavior of states and peoples, then the global financial corporation is not regulated by anything. And on the basis of especially financial capital, shadow and secret societies are being formed that solve problems behind the scenes. Trump called them the deep state. Today they are becoming the main players, and states, with the exception of a few, are now essentially controlled by multinational and global corporations. Russia is among them, and America was among the first. It all started in England, then the roles were distributed. In 1908, there was a question of creating a Federal Reserve System, and a powerful battle was underway. At that time, the largest bankers, Baruchs, Morgans, DuPonts, Warburgs and others gathered on an island near the United States. First of all, American, but also British, including European ones. And they accepted the plan. His formula sounded like this: power is a commodity, even the most expensive one. Therefore, world power should belong to international financiers. And it was they who pushed through the Federal Reserve System in 1913. This is a private office, because it was created by several private banks without the presence of the state. And then as President Woodrow Wilson, who adopted the Federal Reserve System, lamented in his memoirs that he was the most unhappy man because he allowed the state to be robbed. This financial capital has taken over the world power so much that they are shaping the political and economic course of human development today. In all countries, back in the 60s, under the leadership of David Rothschild, the theory of social programming was developed and implemented. Then no one paid any attention to such a thing. And this was a program of turning humanity away from space, when the whole world, after Yuri Gagarin's flight, rushed skyward to a consumer lifestyle. Because if everyone is aiming for space, then who will make a profit? Both science and education have largely turned to the consumer lifestyle. And the Soviet Union also turned to him. As Mikhail Gorbachev said, we need to feed the country so that life is like in the West. They began to compare it with what is happening in Russia and in America. Why? Did the Soviet Union lag behind in space, in technology, in culture, education? No. But it was necessary to catch up in terms of consumption, so that humanity turns specifically to consumption. And this strengthens the power of bankers and financiers and detaches humanity from the intellectual and spiritual direction of development. That's what we got today. And today we see that Bill Gates, Soros, and this whole team are speaking out more openly. They control the global community through money, and this world government sets certain programs. Back in 1971, Alvin Toffler, an American philosopher, sociologist and futurist, drew a picture of how we will live in the 20th century. But the question arises, how could he have predicted such a thing? Did he anticipate this? Or did he just announce someone's plans? Or did he propose to the specified shadow community his plan that this is the kind of world we need? Today, they govern not only states and peoples, but every person, changing his worldview. And after the worldview, consciousness also changes. Now, when they talk about the war, it is difficult to guess whether it will be or not. Well, for example, Ukraine. And this does not depend on us, ordinary people. Ukraine's war with Russia means Russia's war with NATO, because NATO has given guarantees of Ukraine's security. The question is, who wants this war? Our peoples do not want, but the army of Ukraine and the army of Russia do not want to fight, because the youngest, the most beautiful, the most courageous are dying. Neither Zelensky nor Putin really want to fight, although somewhere there was something looming in Putin's mind, but maybe a short, quick war and victory, which will ensure success in the upcoming elections. But there was no quick victory. Today, all classes and politicians, except for an obvious minority, understand that victory would be the prevention of war. And there are an overwhelming majority of such people. And some handful want war. For what? In order for the Slavs to weaken each other geopolitically. And the Hitlers don't need them to destroy the Slavic world. They will destroy each other themselves. The most active will die there, the future oppositionists for the corrupt government. Both in Ukraine and in Russia, that's them there, in hell. That is, there is a cleansing from honor, conscience, and holiness. The cleansing of the honest is happening there. And the scoundrels, the children of deputies and others, will never go there. And if they go, then only later. They will bring victory to Moscow over Kiev, if such a thing happens. They know where and when to go. So no one needs this war. We witnessed how the bombing of Yugoslavia began, when the destruction of a beautiful state was underway. At that time, there was already an agreement signed in 1997, Russia-NATO, according to which it was forbidden to bomb Yugoslavia. And NATO did not want war. Why does Europe need a war? Russia was friends with the Germans. The Belgians did not need this war. Even the Swiss, who are not members of NATO, shouted that all refugees and drug traffickers from Kosovo were running to them. But someone gave the command to bomb. Russia is playing a guessing game today. We see that Biden has personal motives to hate Russians for insulting him, for discrediting his son, revealing his deal on Donbass, Lugansk. Plus, there are political, economic interests and, most importantly, national interest to close access to cubic meters of Russian gas to Europe, because the Europeans wanted to buy expensive American shale gas there, and it is beneficial for the American economy. They made an unprecedented decision to sell crude oil and shale gas, to keep your economy afloat, at least. And this task must be solved. And for this, Russia's war with Ukraine is very important. They pressed Europe through the NATO Council, and the said council decided, since NATO gave security guarantees to Ukraine not to buy a single cubic meter of Russian gas. That's all. Biden gave the go-ahead. And who is above the American president? Congress did not press him on the war. So there is a shadow government structure, what Trump called the deep state. But do not think that these people are sitting in bunkers somewhere, hiding. It is a worldwide network. These are network-centric mechanisms that have the task of advancing to key positions where strategic decisions are made. There are several centers, the Bilderberg Club, the Trilateral Commission, and so on. In Russia today, everything is done according to Gref. This is the so-called fifth column network. The striking force of the fifth column is the Russian Guard, the prosecutor's office, the courts, the investigative committee, the FSB, and so on. They get an impulse from somewhere to put some specific person, like Navalny or any other person. They take a salute and violating the laws, morality, honor, conscience, go and do this good deed. This is how the fifth columns are created. And personally, Russian President Vladimir Putin no longer makes any decisions. He's the main advertiser today. So much for Putin. And what did he say during the message on February 29? Is this a message to the Federal Assembly? The course of Russia's development. He talks about fighting poverty. And all this contrasted with the background, the people in the hall, who have completely different salaries, capitals, and incomes. They were so glad that 500,000 or 1 million had not been withheld from them. And the president found money somewhere for payments that are not charged from their income. He also accepted the pension reform. Putin declared, "As long as I am president, the retirement age will not be raised." So he is no longer a decision-making president. Russia is completely isolated today. It is the first time in its history that they have found themselves in such a situation. And no matter what they say about the fact that there are only enemies around, this is primarily the fault of the current government. There is no coordinated foreign policy in the Russian state. The special services do one thing without obeying the foreign ministry. Without coordinating with it, the Ministry of Defense does its own thing. Outside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, someone else is doing diplomacy. In addition, China continues to advance. They actually captured half of Kyrgyzstan and half of Kazakhstan in different ways. Do the Chinese also fall under the world government? They're special, with their own distinct path. There are geopolitical principles. One of them, the population without land is transferred to lands without population, and the Chinese have their own mega project. It is an alternative to the American one. Both the US and China are clashing. The Chinese do not emphasize anywhere that they will carry socialism. The Chinese dream is to take over the world, and the first thing they take control of is strategic communication routes under the guise of the Silk Road. The Chinese have their own version of the Northern Sea Route. Now Deputy Prime Minister Kuznelin has officially submitted a project for the construction of large megacities, agglomerations, so that the entire population of rural and small towns can be dragged into these agglomerations. They say that it is more economical, there is no need to spend money on a supply system, communal services, and gas to the villages, and the lands should be empty. And literally this project is just to depopulate the earth. And there are two parallel processes going on. The first is that Russia gives the Chinese territories of advanced development for 49 and 70 years. But in fact they give it away forever. In 70 years, the Chinese will restore order there, develop the economy, transfer happiness there and then give it to Russia again. It won't happen. There is an open policy of genocide, the cleansing of territories from residents. This is Hitler's New Ost plan, only not for the European territory, but for the whole of Russia. This is worse than Hitler's fascism. The process of depopulation of vast territories of Russia is underway, in order for those who are in power today to sell them profitably, to anyone but to sell. And that's why this pandemic, pension reform and other manifestations of genocide, all in order for citizens to die or leave faster. When they say that 70,000 scientists have left over the past 3 years, and Putin and his team do not care, this suggests that there is a purge of the population of present-day Russia. Naturally, the Chinese are looking at this and are probably already making plans for our territory, for empty lands. The Chinese are imposing projects on the Northern Sea Route, on the regions of Eastern Siberia, the Far East, and so on. When it comes to a conflict situation with the Americans, since there are not enough resources for two projects, American and Chinese, because the Chinese are increasing the level of consumption, but the Americans do not want to lose this level either. They will simply agree among themselves. You are before the Urals, we are after the Urals. And the Russian leadership will agree, and they will be given an island in the Pacific, Atlantic or Indian Ocean. Please go there, live there, and we will manage here, the Americans or the Chinese. Moreover, there is a threat of disaster for both Americans and coastal Chinese. Do you need to relocate the American elite somewhere? They don't really want to go to Europe. This is not the safest place, and icing is predicted there soon. So the destruction of multinational Russia, and above all Russians, is underway, as well as their substitution. In Russia, there has never been a more vile power elite in its entire history than today.